Welcome to this video on data backup strategies. On the CISSP exam, it's important to understand from a disaster recovery perspective data backup strategies because that is one of the most important parts of disaster recovery. The idea behind this is that we duplicate data so that we can retrieve it at a later time. Basically, we can copying data. So if something bad were to happen to the host that's holding the data, processing the data or transmitting the data, we can retrieve or recover the data so we can restore system operations or recover system operations as well. For the exam, there are certainly some concepts you need to be familiar with, and the first one being mirroring. This creates an identical copy of data on two or more storage mediums. We talked about this in a previous video when we talked about redundant array of independent disk or RAID. What we are doing here is creating identical copies and storing them on two different independent drives or mediums or whatever we are using. This is so if one drive or one medium were to be corrupted, we would have another medium that we can restore from. The other concept you need to be familiar with is the archive bit or also called backup bit. This allows a software utility to determine if a file has been backed up or not, and this is usually indicated by 0 or 1. However, if backup bit or archive bit has been set to 1, then the file needs to be backed up because it has changed at some point since the backup was last performed. So now on the exam you need to be familiar with some backup strategies. So let's talk about those, and let's start with the full backup, which create a complete copy of all system data, then set the archive bit to 0 because everything being backed up, right? At this point it's all been backed up, nothing was changed. So when that full backup is complete, the archive bit on every file will be set on 0. So normally what we would do is we would perform a full backup, say on a Sunday, right? Like say a Sunday morning when no one at work, no one's doing anything, the system pretty much as idle at the point, and now we can do a full backup of the data. The next type of backup we can do is called differential backup. This is going to be backed up everything that has changed since the last full backup. If there's no change, then the archive bit stays 0. But if there's been any change, then the archive bits is going to be set to 1, and then you know what the difference is between the full backup and what we need to back up now, right? So the data is created on modified, the metadata will change, so the backup utility will compare either the backup bit or the timestamp to determine if any of the data needs to be copied or backed up at that point. So we have the full backup and the differential. So let's talk through kind of common scenario you might see in the field. For instance, full backup again done on a Sunday morning or maybe Sunday evening when the system is idle and it is at really its lowest point, so we can capture all of the data. Then maybe we do a differential backup on Wednesday. Now that's great and all, but what do we do on Monday and Tuesday? If we want to backup data, then when we would perform, it's called incremental backup. This is backed up any change that have occurred since the last backup, whether it's a full backup or a differential backup. It's going to back up anything that's been changed, anything that has the archive bit set to 1. Okay, and then we can do them on both days. We can do them on Monday, we can do them on Tuesday, then we can also do them on Thursday. Then maybe we want to do another differential backup on Friday, and then the differential backup will capture anything that's changed since the last full backup, right? It's not targeting the Wednesday's backup, so it's going all the way back to the Sunday and doing a differential, and it's also including this incremental as a part of that backup. Then Saturday we can do another incremental, and then we repeat the process and do another full backup on Sunday and start all over again. Now what's important to know about this backup is the reason we have so many different ones. If you can imagine a system like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Microsoft, VMware, it doesn't really matter, right? Think of a big vendor. Imagine doing a full backup of their system. It would be a gigantic, it would be enormous, the size of backup, right? So that's why we only do them every so often, and that's why we also have the differential. So we can do medium size backup, right? And then these incremental are just small backup. Okay, so again, the full backup used to create full backup image, complete carbon copy of the entire system. A differential backup, any differences since the last full backup. So this Wednesday would back up from Sunday, and this Friday backup would be from the Sunday. Okay, so we back up everything. The incremental will not change its archive bit. They are just capturing incremental changes until we have time to do that differential or another full backup. Okay, so this is just a way that we can implement a backup strategy. Yeah, because if something were to go on Tuesday, right, something bad happened on the system, we can recover from this incremental and we would have all our data, right? And same being said on Wednesday, Thursday and Friday. Okay, and a good rule of thumb is follow 3-to-1 backup rule. Have at least 3 copies of your data backup. Store backup copies in 2 different devices or storage media or premises. So we want to have 2 different devices that have a copy of our backup data, and then store at least 1 data backup premises. So we have 2 copies on premises and 1 copy off premises, and the total 3 copies or more. You are welcome to do as many as you want, but 3-to-1 rule recommends 3 copies, 2 different storage device and 1 off-prem. Now, to back up your data off-prem, we can use what's called electronic vaulting. There's maybe we have some storage server and we are going to send them to an off-premises location. The first way we can do this is to perform remote journaling. This is sending our logs and metadata off-prem, so we can back up our system logs, so we can perform auditing, audit trail analysis, all those different things that we do with the system log, and also the metadata, so we can track all this change to the data as well. And then we can also do what's called remote mirroring, where we are streaming all of those changes in real time to our off-premises location, and that would coincide with the 3-to-1 rule, where we are backing everything up offsite. So to recover from a backup copy, we are going to need both journal and backup data itself. So it's important to keep these 2 things separate from each other. That way we know exactly what to recover from, because if you remember, the full backup and differential backup and the incremental backup are all keeping track based on the timestamp or the backup bit, right? So now we know what we need to recover from, and then here would be the data itself. So we would use journal to identify the exactly what needs to be recovered, or we can just refer back to the incremental backup and start from there. And this data can be stored on any medium or medium depending on how you want to refer to it. It's the same thing, media and medium. They can be stored on disk, tapes, external drives, and so on. It doesn't really matter how you want to store it. Most compliance regulation standard, whatever it is, most of them do not dictate how backups are done. That is left up to the organization. So if you have a tape drive, you can do that. If you are just want to use external drives, you can do that as well. Another option is to perform snapshot, which are virtual copies of the file, directories, volumes, and so on. Oftentimes this is done with the hypervisor. So if you are using like vSphere or something like that, you can just go in and take the snapshot VM or a snapshot of the data stored and then move it off premises. And that's how you could do your backup virtually. There's also variety of software that will do this for you as well. Another thing that we can consider is an escrow agreement. As a part of the storage, it is not just a data, it's also the key, right? Keys, our certificates, our encryption keys, those kind of things. That's part of it as well, because we might need that to restore or recover operation. So this is a form of backing up your keys or certificates that you will need to perform operation. So what the escrow is just a place that managed by third party, and that party is called escrow agent that would hold all your backup copies for the crypto keys, your certificates, whatever else you need. Then you can place them in there. One of your recovery agent from your organization can go and access this key or certificates during or a recovery or a restoration process. Then we also have a software escrow. This is what we are going to store and protect copies of our software licenses, any source code and other data that we need for the software, any documentation, whatever is needed to operate our software application or our in-house developed code. We can put these in a escrow as well and just protect us just in case. Say a software vendor goes out of business, or if they are unavailable when we need them for a recovery or restoration operation, we can just refer to the escrow and go to there. Now in terms of actually performing the backup strategies, you want to select strategies that going to work best for the organization based on the value of the data. And really this has to do with setting up a schedule where we can do the first in first out schedule and the grandfather father son schedule or the Tower of Hanoi schedule. It really depends. Now once upon a time they asked this question on the exam, but I don't believe they will anymore. But if you want to learn more about these processes, you can certainly research them. They are pretty complicated in terms of how you are rotating your media in and out of backups, and then also off on-prem and off-prem and those kind of things. But eventually the idea is you are only gonna have so much media or mediums to backup data. So at some point, depending on the regulation, you are gonna have to rotate your tapes, you are gonna have to rotate your external drives or your disk or whatever it is, right? So we are going to have to override or erase the data. The most important thing is to understand is whether schedule strategy you select. You need to make sure that your system remain compliant. So if you have maintained data for a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the regulation is, we want to make sure that the backup strategies meet the regulation. So the bottom line for the video is to understand the backup concept and strategies we talk about, know the different type of data backup, know the different type of electronic vaulting we talk about, and also know the escrow agreement.